I stood at the edge of my ranch, fists clenched and jaw tight, staring at the giant iron fence that now boxed in my entire vegetable patch, the chicken coop, and my 2 goats. On the other side, a shiny brass padlock gleamed in the sun, dangling from a thick chain. I tugged at the gate again. It was locked tight. I couldn't get to my crops. I couldn't feed my animals. And the worst part, the HOA did it. That's right, the Homeowners Association had fenced off my own land. I shouted, "Whose bright idea was this?" My voice echoed across the pasture, but there was no one in sight. Just the sound of clucking hens panicking in the coop, and Max, my goat, letting out a long, helpless bleat. The truth hit me hard. I didn't have the key. They had fenced off my property, and they had the only key. My chest burned with anger. This wasn't just a fence. It was a line they'd crossed. And right there, I made a silent promise. I'm going to buy the very land this gate is sitting on, and I'll be the only one holding that key. But how it got to this point, now that's the real story. Let me take you back to how this whole mess began. It started 3 months ago. Back then, everything was peaceful. My name's Daniel Carter, but folks around here just call me Dan. I'm a 41-year-old former firefighter who used to live in the city before moving out to the countryside. After retiring, I bought a quiet piece of land in Cedar Creek Valley just outside town. A small ranch, not too big, but big enough for me, my crops, and the animals I took in. I had 2 goats, Max and Daisy, a dozen hens, and 3 alpacas named Chili, Pepper, and Fluff. I also grew fresh vegetables, tomatoes, cucumbers, corn, and a patch of strawberries. My place wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. That's all I ever wanted. Then came the HOA. They were never supposed to be part of this area. In fact, I didn't even know there was an HOA until a lady named Tracy knocked on my door one morning. Tracy Thompson was the president of the newly formed Cedar Creek Heights HOA. She was in her early 50s with a tight bun, fancy shoes not made for dirt, and a clipboard that seemed glued to her hand. She smiled too much, but her eyes didn't. "Hello, Mr. Carter," she said, her tone sweet but firm. "I'm here to introduce you to the community guidelines. We've recently incorporated this entire region under our HOA." "What community?" I asked. "This is farmland." "Well," she continued, "technically, with all the new homes being developed nearby, the HOA has decided to extend its jurisdiction. It's about keeping standards, cleanliness, order, curb appeal." I laughed. I thought she was joking. "Lady, I've got a goat chewing on a tire out back and a chicken that sleeps in my mailbox. You think this place is going to be part of a suburban HOA?" She didn't laugh. She just handed me a thick booklet titled Cedar Creek Heights Homeowners, Rules and Conduct Agreement. I didn't even sign anything, but apparently they claimed I was grandfathered in. At first I ignored them. I thought surely they'd realize a ranch doesn't fit into their picture-perfect lawns and country club barbecues, but it only got worse. First, they told me my rooster was too loud and had to go. Then, they sent me a notice claiming my scarecrow violated visual standards. When I didn't respond to their complaints, they fined me $100 for refusal to comply. That's when I realized Tracy wasn't working alone. Her right-hand man, George Whitaker, former mall security turned self-declared enforcer, started snooping around my property. I'd see him drive by slowly in his black SUV, writing stuff down. He even took photos once while I was feeding the goats. But I stood my ground. I refused to pay the fines. I kept to myself and didn't cause trouble until that day. The day I returned from town to find a full metal fence stretching across the back half of my land. Not just some temporary thing. This was heavy duty, welded, reinforced with thick iron bars, my tomatoes, my hens, my animals, all locked behind it. There was a sign on the fence in bold red letters. Private area. Do not enter. Hawaii restricted zone. I nearly passed out from the shock. Who gives someone the right to fence off another man's land? I marched straight to the HOA office, which was ironically built inside an old bank building in town. I stormed past the receptionist, ignoring her protests. Tracy looked up from her desk. She didn't even seem surprised to see me. "Dan," she said calmly, "I understand you're upset, but we had to take action. There were multiple complaints. Complaints. I barked about what? Well, your animals are free range. They wander. Your fence isn't up to HOA height code, and frankly, some of your neighbors are worried about sanitation. We couldn't wait any longer. You fenced off my land without my permission. Tracy shrugged. You didn't respond to our letters. Legally, we filed for a property intervention. It's temporary until a decision is made. A decision by who? I asked. The HOA board, she replied with a tight smile. We're meeting next month. In the meantime, the key stays with us. I couldn't believe it. I walked out of there fuming. I knew I had to do something. And that's when I got an idea. I went down to the county recorder's office the next day and started digging. I wanted to know exactly where the HOA's limits ended and where my land began. That's when I found something strange. There was a tiny strip of land right where the gate was installed, just 12 feet wide and 40 feet long. It used to belong to a man named Carl Fielder, who passed away years ago. And guess what? The HOA had been leasing that strip just for the fence. The lease was expiring in 2 weeks. Suddenly, my mind raced. If I could buy that little strip, just that strip, I could own the part of the land where the gate and lock sat. That meant the fence wouldn't belong to them anymore. I smiled to myself, and that's exactly what I did. I contacted Carl's niece, the heir to the strip of land. She had no idea the HOA was even using it. When I offered her cash up front, no questions asked, she agreed to sell. I filed the paperwork. I kept everything quiet. The sale wouldn't go public for 5 more days. But I had one condition in the deal. I wanted the only key to the old service gate on that land, the same one the HOA now used to access the fenced area. That key was in her attic, and the day she handed it to me, I knew this war wasn't over. It was just getting started. Now that the land and the key were mine, I had one job left. Wait, and know when they found out what I did, it would rock their perfect little HOA world. But just when I thought I had the upper hand again, something happened that shook everything. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of sirens. A fire truck and 2 police cars were parked on the road near my property. My crops were trampled, the fence was broken in one spot, and one of my alpacas was missing. The air smelled like burnt grass and rubber. I sprinted down the gravel path, heart pounding like a drum. Max and Daisy were bleeding like mad, and my chickens flapped around in a frenzy as smoke curled lazily in the morning light. My boots crushed over broken stalks of corn and tomato vines, and then my stomach twisted. The iron fence had been cut clean through. Sparks from a blowtorch or some kind of heavy-duty saw still glinted on the edge of the break. The soil near the hole was scorched. Someone had forced their way in. The officers on the scene barely looked up when I arrived. A young cop with sunglasses and a bored expression stood with a notepad. "What happened?" I barked. "You Daniel Carter?" he asked. "Yes, this is my land. We got a call about a disturbance. Someone reported yelling a possible explosion. When we arrived, we found this." He waved toward the damaged fence and signs of forced entry. "Firefighters put out a small grass fire over there." "Where's Fluff?" I gasped. "My alpaca's gone." The officer flipped through his notepad. Neighbors said they saw an animal being loaded into a white pickup truck around dawn. License plate not visible. I felt dizzy. "They stole my alpaca?" He nodded. "We're still investigating." My heart burned. Not only had they fenced my land, they came back. They broke their own fence, damaged my crops, and kidnapped one of my animals. I didn't have proof yet, but deep down, I knew who was behind this. Tracy, or one of her HOA foot soldiers. And I was done playing nice. Back at the house, I paced for hours. I fed Max and Daisy, checked on the hens, tried to calm down, but I couldn't stop thinking about Fluff. That alpaca had been with me since the start, rescued from a farm going bankrupt. She had a crooked smile and followed me like a shadow. I owed her more than just worry. I decided it was time to make a move. First, I changed the lock on the service gate. That strip of land, the one the HOA had built the fence through, was officially mine now. And that meant I could do whatever I wanted with it. So I called up my buddy Travis. Travis Richardson was a local welder with hands like anvils and a heart of gold. I met him back in my firefighter days. He was a volunteer on a brush fire job years ago, and we'd stayed in touch. When I told him what the HOA had done, He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in an hour," he said, and he showed up with a truck full of steel, a welding rig, and 2 thermoses of coffee. We spent the rest of the day building a new gate, one that swung open into my land and had a lock that only I had the key to. On the fence post, I screwed in a shiny aluminum sign that read, "Private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted." And just for fun, I added another below it. "No HOA access beyond this point." That night, I sat on my porch with Max curled at my feet, watching the stars rise. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control again. The next morning, the knock came at exactly 8 a.m. Tracy. She stood at my front gate wearing a navy blazer, pearls, and that same fake smile she always wore. Beside her was George Whitaker in full security mode. Black boots, radio on his hip, arms crossed like a bouncer. "Good morning, Mr. Carter," she chirped. I didn't even open the gate. "What do you want?" "We noticed someone tampered with the fence." "Nope," I said calmly. "I didn't tamper. I own that section now." Her eyes twitched. "Excuse me. That little strip you were leasing for your precious fence. I bought it from the original owner. As of yesterday, it's mine." "And your fence?" "Well, it's trespassing." George shifted uncomfortably. Tracy turned pale. "I'd like the key back," she demanded. I pulled it out from my back pocket and held it up like a trophy. "This key? Sorry, this one doesn't belong to you anymore." Tracy's smile cracked. "You can't do this," she hissed. "Try me." They left fuming. I could hear George muttering under his breath all the way to their car. But deep inside, I knew that wasn't the last I'd see of them. Sure enough, 3 days later, I received an envelope in the mail. Inside was a formal cease and desist letter from the HOA's attorney demanding that I remove all unauthorized modifications to the community fence and return all HOA property, including access mechanisms. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. But then things got quiet. Too quiet. No more patrols, no more complaints. Even Tracy didn't show her face. Then a week later, I went to check on the far side of my land where the tree line met the creek and found something chilling. A fresh trench had been dug across my fence line, and lying inside, wrapped in plastic and half buried, were bags of fertilizer mixed with strange chemicals. I stepped back, hands shaking. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. This was sabotage, and they were about to find out they messed with the wrong rancher. Hey there, where are you watching or reading from? I'd love to know what part of the world this story is reaching. Drop your location in the comments. I stared down into that shallow trench like it was a crime scene, because in a way it was. The plastic bags were torn open, some contents spilling into the soil. I could smell the sharp sting of ammonium nitrate mixed with herbicide. Whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. This wasn't an accident. This was an attack. I snapped a few pictures with my phone, making sure to get close-ups of the torn fertilizer bags, the trench, and the disturbed soil around the base of my fence. Then I called the sheriff. Sheriff Wayne Collier had been in the county longer than any of us. He had a thick southern drawl, wore the same brown boots every day, and carried a notepad instead of a gun most times. I'd known him since I moved to Cedar Creek. He wasn't the fastest man on the force, but he was fair and didn't take kindly to bullies. He arrived within an hour. "Lord have mercy, Dan," he said, adjusting his hat as he looked down at the trench. "This is deliberate." "I thought so too," I muttered. "It's like someone's trying to poison the land or cause an explosion." Sheriff Wayne looked at the chemical mix and nodded grimly. This kind of mixture is used in illegal fireworks, or worse, could have been a warning or a setup. I raised an eyebrow. "A setup?" He sighed. "If someone wanted to make it look like you were planning something dangerous, this would be the way to do it." The thought made my stomach drop. Was the HOA really willing to go that far? Wayne had the county crime unit come out and collect the bags for testing. Meanwhile, I double-checked my security cameras. Unfortunately, the trench was just outside their range. But I noticed something else. At 3:17 a.m. the night before, one of my motion sensors had flickered, just a brief light near the tree line. A shadow moved across the edge of the camera, barely a blur, but it was there. It was someone tall wearing a hood. Whoever they were, they knew where my cameras didn't reach. That's when I knew this wasn't just Tracy or George throwing a tantrum. This was calculated. This was personal. So I made a decision. If they wanted a war, I was going to give them one. I hired a private investigator named Sam Delgado, a quiet ex-military guy with a camera in one hand and a legal notepad in the other. I met him through a friend in town who once had a nasty dispute over stolen land documents. Sam was the kind of guy who didn't speak unless he had something useful to say. When I told him what had happened, he didn't flinch. "I'll watch them," he said. "Give me 3 days." Meanwhile, I started reinforcing my property. I put up solar-powered motion lights all along the tree line. I installed new cameras with wider coverage, and I upgraded the locks, not just on the service gate, but everywhere. I even dug 2 narrow trenches of my own and lined them with thorny bushes. My land looked like Fort Knox, but all that tension, it was starting to weigh on me. I wasn't sleeping, I barely ate, and Max and Daisy, my goats, sensed it too. They stayed close, almost protectively. It reminded me of my days in the firehouse, the stillness before a major blaze, the way the world seemed too calm before it all went up in smoke. Then on day 3, Sam called me. "Got something?" He said, "Meet me at the outpost." The outpost was a small diner on the edge of town where ranchers, loggers, and retired cops went to eat chili and share gossip. I found Sam in the corner booth, laptop open, sipping black coffee. He pushed the screen toward me. There it was, grainy footage from a camera hidden in a neighbor's garden. Sam had paid her $100 to let him set it up. The figure in the video was wearing dark clothes and a hood. He moved fast, but as he turned toward the street lamp, I caught a glimpse of something unmistakable, a patch on his jacket that read, "Cedar Creek HOA Enforcement." I leaned in closer. It was George. I clenched my fists under the table. That smug, nosy, wannabe cop had gone too far, and I finally had proof. "Is this enough to press charges?" I asked. Sam shrugged. "For trespassing, maybe, but you'll need more to tie him to the chemicals." "I'll get more," I said, jaw tight. Sam nodded slowly. "Careful, Dan. They're pushing you, trying to get you to react. Stay smart." I did my best to take his advice. For the next few days, I acted like nothing had happened. I attended the town's farmer's market, sold a few baskets of tomatoes and eggs. I waved at neighbors and even let my alpacas graze out front. People thought I was calm, but inside I was boiling. Then came the worst blow of all. That Friday morning, I woke up to find a legal notice posted on my barn door. It was a declaration of violation. The HOA claimed that I had built unauthorized structures, referring to the new gate and camera poles, disturbed the community aesthetic by installing floodlights, and most insulting of all, harbored unregistered livestock. They had filed for a civil hearing with the town council. Tracy wanted me dragged into court. If they succeeded, I could be fined $5,000 per day or worse, forced to remove everything I'd built and possibly relocate my animals. I stood in that barn doorway for what felt like hours, clutching that paper in my hand. My world felt like it was spinning. I thought I was prepared for anything, but now they were trying to bury me in legal traps. My throat tightened. Max nuzzled against my leg, trying to calm me. Then I heard the engine, a loud rumble, the crunch of tires on gravel. I walked outside to see a sleek black SUV pulling up the driveway. It stopped right at the edge of the gate. The window rolled down. It was Tracy. She wore a smoke. I leaned back in my chair. And the sabotage, the court motions, the fencing, classic pressure tactics, he said. Force you to sell, then develop. I stared at the papers, rage crawling under my skin. I had to act fast but smart, so I came up with a plan. The town council hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. That gave me 4 days to turn things around. And this time, I wasn't just going to defend myself. I was going to expose them. I called Sheriff Wayne and shared everything, especially the financials. He raised an eyebrow. "Now that's something," he muttered. "You submit this officially." "Tomorrow morning," I said, "but I need a favor." "What's that?" "I want to hit them where it hurts," I said, voice steady. "I want this hearing public. No closed room meeting, full audience." Wayne nodded. "That can be arranged." The next day, I showed up at town hall with a big box in my hands. Documents, pictures, video clips, Everything Sam and I had collected. I handed it all to the clerk with a request for public record inclusion. That meant it would be shared with every council member and be visible during the hearing. I also made a few quiet calls to the neighbors, especially the ones who hadn't been thrilled about the HOA either. Word spread fast. People wanted to watch. Monday arrived. The Cedar Creek Town Hall was packed wall to wall. Locals filled the seats. Reporters stood at the back. Some folks brought popcorn like it was a courtroom drama. I wore jeans, a button-up shirt, and walked in with Max on a leash. No one dared say anything about my goat in a government building. Not after everything that had happened. Tracy was already there dressed sharp in a red power suit. She smiled wide when she saw me, but her eyes narrowed when she noticed the crowd. George sat beside her, clearly sweating. His tie looked 2 sizes too tight. The council chairwoman, Mrs. Denise Waller, banged her gavel. We're here today to discuss complaints filed against Mr. Daniel Carter by the Cedar Creek Heights Homeowners Association, including allegations of unauthorized construction, livestock violations, and obstructing HOA access. I stood up. Madam Chair, I'd like to submit a counter-motion. A few murmurs spread through the crowd. I have evidence that these complaints are not only false, but part of a coordinated attempt by HOA officials to pressure me off my legally owned land in connection with a real estate development scheme. Denise blinked. That's a serious claim, Mr. Carter. I have proof, I said calmly, and handed Sam's folder to the clerk. As the council projected the documents on the screen, silence filled the room. Payment records, board memberships, photos of George at the fence, the chemical trench report. Gasps spread through the audience. George's face turned ghostly white. Tracy stood up. This is an invasion of privacy. Denise raised a hand. You'll have your chance to speak, Mrs. Thompson. I stepped aside as they flipped to the last page. The HOA's original fencing lease, showing the land was never theirs to build on. Then I calmly handed the council a certified deed. This is my ownership of the service gate strip. As of 3 weeks ago, I'm the legal owner. That fence, those locks are on my land, which means their gate is trespassing, not the other way around. The room erupted in low chatter. People nodded, some even clapped quietly. Mrs. Waller leaned forward, her voice cold. Mrs. Thompson, is there anything you'd like to say? Tracy's lips trembled. This man has disrupted the order. He's out of control. Denise looked unimpressed. You mean he refused to surrender his farm to development? The council broke for 10 minutes. When they returned, Denise banged the gavel again. After review of all submitted evidence, she said, we are dismissing all charges filed by the Cedar Creek Heights HOA against Mr. Carter. Furthermore, this council is opening a formal investigation into the HOA's operations. Tracy's face fell. But Mrs. Thompson, Denise cut in, you are hereby suspended from HOA duties pending inquiry. It was over, or so I thought. That night I got a call from Sam. They're not done. What do you mean? I followed George after the hearing. He met with someone from Brightbine. They were arguing about what? About you. George said you were becoming a liability. The other guy said, and I quote, handle it quietly or we'll handle you. I gripped the phone tighter. This wasn't over. I might have won the public fight, but behind the scenes they were planning something worse. The next morning my power went out and someone left a dead chicken on my porch. A warning. The dead chicken lay stiff on my porch, neck twisted unnaturally. Feathers were scattered across the wooden steps like confetti from a horror show. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, chest heavy, breathing slow. This wasn't just intimidation. This was personal. I took a few pictures, then called Sheriff Wayne again. He showed up within the hour, stepping out of his cruiser with a look that said he'd seen one too many of these HOA games already. What now? He asked as he stepped onto the porch and spotted the bird. His mustache twitched. Jesus, Dan, it was waiting for me, I said. Someone put it here in the early morning. No blood trail, no coyote or fox, just placed. Wayne crouched down and examined the body. Neck's been snapped clean. Human hands. We both knew who was behind this even without saying it out loud. He stood and let out a long sigh. I'll have it logged and bagged. But unless someone saw something or you got a camera on the porch, I don't, I said bitterly. That's the one angle I didn't cover. He gave me a long look. You're poking a beehive, Dan. These people have money, lawyers, friends in high places. If they think you're a threat to their plans, I am a threat to their plans, I said, fists clenched. And now they know I'm not backing down. Wayne didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he gave a slow nod. All right then. Let's fight smart. After he left, I did two things. First, I called Sam and told him everything. He said he'd ramp up surveillance immediately. Second, I went to the town's building permits office. If Bright Pine Estates wanted this land, I needed to know why. What were they really after? Why the push? Why the desperation? The answer made my jaw drop. I sat in a dusty records room, flipping through old land surveys and zoning requests. When I found it, a plan dated 2 years ago showing a proposed luxury housing estate complete with 40 homes, a golf course, and even a private airstrip. And right in the middle of the map, my ranch. They'd been planning this for years, but my land was the final puzzle piece. Without it, the development couldn't get zoning approval, and I wasn't selling. I took pictures of the blueprint and ran straight to Sam. They've been planning this for 2 years, I said, spreading the documents across his desk. Tracy, George, the developer, they're all in on it. Sam studied the map with narrowed eyes. They need your land to complete the project. No easement, no permit. I pointed to the creek on the edge of my ranch. And look, this creek is the only water access for that whole neighborhood. Sam looked up, grinning. You own the creek too? Yep. Bought it with the back lot. That's why they're panicking. Then his face turned serious. That makes this dangerous, Dan. They'll get desperate. And they did. That night I was making rounds with a flashlight, checking the newly installed floodlights when I heard it. A snap, a rustle, then a low grunt. I turned the light fast, and there he was, George, caught halfway over my back fence, dressed in all black, gloves on, tool belt around his waist. He froze like a raccoon in headlights. You've got 10 seconds to get off my land before I drop you, I shouted, raising my phone to start filming. But George didn't move. Instead, he pulled something from his pocket. I stepped back, hand reaching instinctively for the pepper spray in my belt. But it wasn't a weapon. It was a USB stick. He tossed it onto the ground. What is that? I asked. He said nothing, just stared. Then he turned and vanished into the woods before I could stop him. I picked up the drive and ran back inside. Max and Daisy followed me anxiously, sensing the tension. I plugged the USB into my laptop. Inside was a single folder labeled Truth. I clicked it open. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were emails, dozens of them, between Tracy and Bright Pine executives discussing how to squeeze out the farmer, referencing me by name. One message dated just last month read, if Carter won't sell, escalate, cut his water, block his access. If necessary, sabotage his livestock. We'll settle in court later. Another George can handle the dirty work. He's loyal and expendable. My jaw dropped. They were using him, George. And judging by his actions tonight, maybe he finally realized it. I copied every file, printed hard copies, and backed it all up twice. Then I sent it to Sam, Sheriff Wayne, and the town council with the subject line, attempted land takeover, proof of sabotage, fraud, and conspiracy. That same night, George called me from a blocked number. I answered. You saw it? He asked. Yeah, silence. I didn't know they'd go this far, he said, voice low and shaky. They said you were stubborn, that it was just business. They used you. I know, he whispered. I'm done. Then the line went dead. The next morning, Tracy didn't show up to the HOA board meeting. Instead, the HOA's secretary announced that she had stepped down for personal reasons. But that wasn't the end of it. 2 hours later, Sam called me. They know you have the files, he said. Britt Pine's lawyers just filed for a restraining order, claiming you threatened George. My blood boiled. They're flipping the narrative now. Sam sighed. They want to shut you up before you go public, but they're too late. And they were, because just as we hung up, a black SUV screeched onto my driveway. This time it wasn't George. It was two men in suits carrying papers shouting legal threats, demanding entry onto my property. I told them no. They got aggressive. And then Max lunged and bit one of them clean on the leg. Max had never bitten anyone before. But the moment that man in the suit tried to shove past me, ignoring the no trespassing sign, waving a thick folder of legal documents in my face, Max launched from the porch like a rocket. He clamped onto the man's thigh with the force of a landmine. The man screamed, flailing backward, crashing into the side of the SUV. His partner shouted and tried to grab Max, but I raised my hand. "Don't you touch my goat," I warned. "Call him off," the other man shouted, eyes wide. "Get off my property." Max let go and stood guard at my feet, snarling low, ready to leap again. The injured man scrambled back into the SUV, bleeding through his suit pants. His partner tossed the folder onto the ground and peeled off down the driveway, tires kicking up gravel and dust. I picked up the folder slowly. At the top was a bold heading, "Cease and desist, demand." But the threat was empty now. They were grasping at straws, trying to scare me, using fake restraining orders and shady lawyers because they were running out of options. I walked back to the porch, Max trotting proudly beside me, and sat down. For a moment, I just breathed. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Later that day, Sam showed up with a flash drive and a grin. "Remember that USB George gave you?" He said. "I ran a full metadata trace. Those emails were drafted and sent from Tracy's HOA off his computer. But get this." He leaned in, lowering his voice. "We also found something else on the drive." "What?" "A recorded call. She must have saved it accidentally." He clicked it open. Tracy's voice played through the speaker. Haughty and condescending. "Look, I don't care what we have to do. Burn his crops, fake a health violation, leak something online about him. If he won't sell, we destroy him. I want that land, and I want it clean by fall." I stared at the speaker in disbelief. "That's enough to bury her," I said. Sam nodded. "I've already forwarded it to the sheriff and the local news." That same evening, the story broke. Local rancher fights HOA land grab. Illegal tactics exposed. The news spread like wildfire. They aired the audio, showed George caught on camera, displayed the emails, everything. Tracy's name was blasted across every screen in town and beyond. The HOA board scrambled. Within 24 hours, the city issued a temporary suspension of all HOA authority in Cedar Creek Heights. The mayor launched a full investigation into HOA practices and zoning deals involving Bright Pine Estates. George officially flipped, turned witness, cooperating with police. He admitted to everything. The trench, the chemicals, the threats. But even as the truth came out, I didn't feel peace yet, because Tracy had disappeared. She wasn't at her house. Her phone was off. No one had seen her since the news broke until the next day. I was out watering the crops. Yes, the ones they tried to poison when a dusty red hatchback rolled up to my gate. It was her. Tracy stepped out in oversized sunglasses, a scarf over her head like she was hiding from the paparazzi. Her lips were pale. Her voice shook. "You ruined me," she said. "No," I replied calmly. "You did that to yourself." She stepped closer, eyeing the fence, the gate, the cameras. Then she reached into her purse. I froze. "Slow," I said. "Pull it out slow." She withdrew a white envelope. Thick. I came to settle. Settle. My shares in Bright Pine, my rights to the fence, my hold over this community, all of it. I'm signing it over. I opened the envelope. Inside were signed affidavit, legal forms, even a handwritten apology letter. "I know I lost," she said, "but I'm not going to jail. I'm leaving the state. I just want this over." I didn't answer. She turned and got into her car, dust trailing behind her as she sped away. I stood there, papers in hand, silent. A full surrender. It wasn't joy I felt, not revenge, just relief. But there was one more thing left to do. That weekend, I threw a big cookout right on the edge of the creek where they had once tried to trench poison into my land. I invited everyone, neighbors, the sheriff, the town council, even George. He showed up quietly, eyes down, but I shook his hand. People laughed, ate grilled corn and chicken, danced to bluegrass music. For the first time, our little community felt free, like we weren't under surveillance or threat anymore. And right before sunset, I raised a glass and stood up on a hay bale. I don't care who you are or where you came from, I said. As long as you treat your neighbors with respect, that's the only rule that ever mattered. Not some HOA code book, just decency. They clapped, some whistled, a few cried, and in that moment, I knew it was over. I'd won, but I hadn't just protected my ranch. I'd protected the soul of the entire valley. The sun dipped low behind the cedar hills, casting a warm golden light across the valley. The fire pit crackled gently. Laughter echoed across my land, and kids ran barefoot through the grass. For the first time in what felt like forever, peace had finally returned to Cedar Creek. Or so I thought. 2 days after the cookout, I got a call from Sam. His voice was low and serious. Dan, I need you to meet me at the county office. Now, when I arrived, he was already there, standing in front of a dusty archive shelf with a frown carved deep into his forehead. On the table were several files, old property blueprints, zoning maps, and a land survey dated 30 years back. What is this? I asked. Sam pulled out a folder labeled Parcel 314B, my ranch's legal identifier. You remember how Tracy wanted your land so badly? He said. I nodded. Well, turns out it wasn't just for development. Your land sits on something else. He laid a thick map across the table. That, he said, pointing to the base of my property near the creek, is an old municipal well. I squinted. A what? A water source the town built in the 80s, abandoned and forgotten. But here's the kicker. He flipped the page. The water rights were never transferred to you when you bought the land. They still belong to the city. But a clause in Tracy's Brit Pine contract says that if the land becomes public use accessible, Brit Pine can file for commercial development of the well area. I stared at him, stunned. She didn't just want the land, I whispered. She wanted the water. Sam nodded. And with you gone, they could have developed a golf resort using free water for irrigation. I clenched my fists, and they almost got away with it. Almost. Sam said, but here's the good news. With Tracy gone and the HOA under investigation, you can now petition for full water rights transfer, legally seal the whole valley from further development. And that's exactly what I did. Over the next 2 weeks, with help from the town council and even Sheriff Wayne, we pushed through the paperwork. I presented evidence of how Bright Pine and the HOA had attempted to exploit the water source through fraudulent pressure campaigns. The city agreed. Water rights were granted in full to me, Daniel Carter, sole owner of Parcel 314B. It meant no one could touch the land. No one could redirect or develop the well. No golf course, no resorts, nothing. It was done. The final nail in their plan's coffin. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Formal confirmation that the Cedar Creek Heights HOA had been dissolved. The state had revoked their charter after an ethics probe revealed multiple code violations and illegal enforcement actions. Tracy, last we heard, she was living in Arizona under a different name, trying to sell vitamin supplements online. George, he started volunteering at the local animal shelter, maybe trying to make peace with the man in the mirror. He mailed me a small wooden plaque 2 months later. Burned into the surface were the words, "Don't fence in what you don't own." I hung it above the fireplace. Max and Daisy got a new pen right beside the coop. Fluff the alpaca. We found her abandoned on the edge of a Bright Pine property, malnourished but alive. She came home, and she's never left my side since. That fall, I harvested the best crop of my life. Tomatoes so red they looked painted. Strawberries the size of eggs. Corn so sweet the neighbors couldn't get enough. I gave most of it away for free. People brought jars, baskets, even pillowcases, and they left with full hearts. Because what we'd all been through, it wasn't just about property lines. It was about standing up to power, about knowing when to fight and how to fight right, about defending what matters, kindness, freedom, community. One night while sipping sweet tea under the stars, I looked down at the old gate key that started it all. I still kept it on a rusted chain by the back door. Not because I needed it anymore, but as a reminder that sometimes the gate they try to lock you out of, you buy it. And when you hold the only key, you win. Thank you for watching. Where are you tuning in from? Drop your state, city, or country in the comments. If you love this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more jaw-dropping HOA revenge and comeback tales that prove no bully is too big to take down.